You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And to provide a background to our conversation, MPC Resolutions Part 2, here's a background report packaged by our correspondent Musa Abubakar.
In a tightening global economy shaped by inflation pressures and energy shocks, Nigeria's monetary authorities are holding firm. At its 305th meeting, the Central Bank of Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee retains the monetary policy rate at 26.5%, alongside other key parameters in a continued effort to rein in inflation. Governor Olayemi Cardoso says the impact of the Middle East energy crisis on Nigeria has been muted thanks to ongoing domestic reforms that are cushioning external shocks.
We have been able to create buffers that have protected us during this period. We are clearly adopting policies that are taking us in the right direction.
The MPC also welcomed an upward review of Nigeria's sovereign credit rating while maintaining that the growth outlook remains resilient despite global uncertainty. In the financial system, bank recapitalization is progressing relatively seamlessly, strengthening confidence in the banking sector.
We are fully on top of all of the banks that are still on that road of travel, and there's business continuing as usual, and we support all the efforts that they are making towards getting over the regulatory.
There is also rising credit flow to SMEs as banks diversify lending, while obligor limits for development finance institutions have been upgraded to deepen access to finance. The message from the Apex Bank: stability remains the anchor, even as growth slowly gathers strength.
Thank you very much, Musa, for that background report. And now joining us here for the discussion which borders on MPC resolutions, let me introduce Dr. Victor Obo. He's the Director, Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank of Nigeria. He's a regular here. Dr. Obo, it's good to have you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, and good morning, Nigerians.
It's good to see you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure too.
You know, there was a part 1 on Thursday of this MPC.
Yes.
You were not around because you were busy, and now we want to hear it, like I said earlier, from the horse's mouth.
That's right.
Can you sort of break it down for us and give us the key takeaways from this resolution that took place?
Thank you once again, Nigerians, and it's a pleasure to be here. The Monetary Policy Committee, as you are aware, met on Tuesday and Wednesday last week. And they decided to retain all the parameters, meaning that the decision they took in the last meeting in February had not changed. Now, there are key parameters that the committee looks at, but among all of them is the monetary policy rate, which is the rate at which it indicates how much the banks, commercial banks, could borrow from the central bank. And if they borrow at a higher interest rate, it translates to higher lending rates for the public or all the investors that would like to borrow from the bank. What this means is that that rate has not changed. Recall that in February, there was a rate cut, meaning that the committee at that time considered the prevailing conditions and felt that there was no need to raise any rate. Rather, they cut the rate to ensure that people borrow at a lower lending rate. So that same decision was upheld in May meeting, meaning that there was no change, even though there was a marginal rise in inflation. Yes. Now, what does it mean? What it means is that the committee reviewed all the recent developments, both internationally and locally or domestically, and found that there was no need to change the status quo. You know, there was no need to change the status quo. People would ask, why did the bank or the committee not raise rates? This is the reason. As the governor said, the committee reviewed all the development and found that even though between March and April, we have a slight increase in inflation rate, meaning that general prices of goods and services had risen a little bit, there was no cause for alarm. Nigeria, as I assure you, is in a very stable macroeconomic conditions. And I tell you why. What we saw as a marginal increase, remember in February, we were at 15.06%. In March, we rose to 15.38%. In April, we rose slightly to 15.69%. If you watch carefully, the increase from February to March was higher than from March to April. From March to April, you saw it slowing down a little bit. In fact, as a matter of comfort, from February to March, we recorded increase in both food and core. When we say food, the general prices of food. When we say core, we talk about non-food items.
So you're prioritizing price stability now?
Yes.
CBN, okay.
Yes. So that is it. But all that changed between March and April. And now what is the cause? What is the driver of this increase? Of course, it's because of the crisis in the Middle East. Because the crisis in the Middle East, as you all know, affected the international price of crude oil, which of course affect our own local price here. So you saw some increase, particularly in the price of PMS or petrol, which of course has multiplier effect on transportation, on the price of food and other commodities. Now, that shock that came from the Middle East is temporary. The rise you saw between February and March was an initial shock that pushed the prices up. From March to April, you saw it, the increase was not as shocking, as serious as it was between February and March. So what it means in essence is that Nigeria was minimally affected. Yes, Nigeria was, compared to other countries, Nigeria was minimally affected. I give you an instance. Our exchange rate, there was little or no depreciation. You saw the exchange rate very, very stable, unlike in other countries. In other countries, they recorded very serious depreciation. Some had to, had to intervene a lot from their reserves. That the central bank did not do. So you can see that because of that, we have remained very stable. And why were we not hurt seriously because of that impact? It was because of the reforms that government had carried out, especially the central bank. That is what shielded us from that shock. And I tell you that our fundamentals are fine, and we are sure that within a very short time, we will return to the path of disinflation, which we had enjoyed for 11 months before this interruption.
So what you are saying now is that Nigeria is insulated, from the effects of
largely insulated, yes.
But ordinary Nigerians who want to contest that with you, going by, the rate at which prices of food items and other, items are, going up. But with the tight liquidity controls and unchanged reserve requirement, how effective do you think the current monetary tightening will bring down this inflation if the crisis in the Middle East persists?
Now, this is it. We have looked at the crisis in the Middle East, and we have done some form of scenario analysis.
Yeah.
Yes. And the central bank is up to its game, reviewing this development over and over and over on a daily basis. So there are checks and balances. If the crisis linger for a while, what should the central bank do? There are issues that have already been mapped out and know exactly what to do. Now, if the crisis linger for a while, what it means is that the price of petrol and some other, goods and services might rise. There are, responses from both the bank and the fiscal authorities. You get the point. Now, what is very good for us in Nigeria is the emergence of the Dangote refinery, which has helped to slow down the freight and all of that are associated with the price of PMS, because that is the major channel through which imported inflation filter into the country. So if all that happened, the coordination between the fiscal and the monetary will be able to map out specific measures that will be put in place to ensure that the prices do not skyrocket, terribly. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria had the option of raising rates. And I tell you, some central banks did that. But when we reviewed our own situation, remember that we have what we call forecast, forward-looking to see what will happen, how inflation will behave in the next 1 or 2, 3 months. And what the forecast tells us is that this is temporary. It could rise for a while, but certainly it will reverse, and we will continue with disinflation. So I want to assure Nigerians that that initial shock, which is not only limited to Nigeria, across the entire world, inflation rose. In fact, in most of our selected countries which we analyzed, they recorded increase in inflation because of the impact of the Middle East crisis. In fact, for us, the impact has been minimal.
The impact has been minimal, but some analysts, economic analysts, have also posited that maybe the central bank should find a way in which it can, cushion the effect, the temporary effect, on the citizens by maybe giving some palliatives or helping some government institutions like the Bank of Industry, the Bank of Agriculture, by giving them incentives to be able to pass on to the populace,
especially the SMEs.
Yes. So that's okay. Now, what the central bank has done is to ensure that commercial banks are well capitalized to be able to be in a good position to support the real sector, including the MSMEs and the rest of them. The recent capitalization exercise that was completed increased the capital base of banks. 33 banks, successfully recapitalized. And even the remaining 4, as the governor said, are on their way to recapitalization. So the bank is in a very good position to be able to lend to the real sector. That is number one. Number two, the development bank institutions, like the BOI and the rest of them, are also well capitalized to be able to support the real sector. What the central bank is doing is to ensure that there is a clear distinction between monetary and fiscal responsibilities. What the central bank all over the world is mandated to do is to create an enabling environment, low and stable prices, to ensure that all other investors are able to perform adequately. Now, the role of subsidy and support services is actually within the realm of the fiscal sector. And I'm sure the ministries, the agencies, and the rest of them are well positioned. And I think they are doing a great job. You know a number of agricultural programs that have been promoted by the federal government. All these are helping to ensure that the price of food, which constitutes the major component of our price basket, has gotten some support. And that has helped to cushion some effect from the rising prices of food. So that is exactly how these roles are distributed.
Okay, Dr. Victor, I would like to know how this signals to investors. The president just went around some countries, with investors, trying to bring, and he has also told people that Nigeria is open for business.
Yes.
So what does this signal?
Oh, yes. Let me tell you, the first signal is even to know, and it's gratifying, that in the midst of this crisis, Nigeria got an upgrade from Standard & Poor rating agency, one of the 3 international rating agencies, Standard & Poor. In the midst of this crisis, Nigeria got an upgrade from B- to B+. It's a stamp.
That's
yes,
good.
It's a stamp of confidence. And what did they say? They say, yeah, in spite of the rattling effect of the crisis in the Middle East, Nigeria is fundamentally positioned, is strong enough to withstand those shocks because of the reforms that have happened and delivered successfully. Then look ahead. And look, these are international rating agencies. They don't look at anybody's face. They say it as it is based on their analysis. You get the point? And they told the whole world that Nigeria is in a very stable condition.
We're on track.
Yes, we're on track. We're on track. Look, what do they see? They see our exchange rate. The reform that has taken place is so fundamental that we cannot reverse to those situations. If not for a situation and time like this, what you would have seen is a boom in black market. Those black market activities where people will begin to have, reap a lot of profit from buying and selling of dollars are gone for good. They are gone. Our dollar, our naira dollar exchange rate is very, very stable. For the first time in many decades, you can walk into the bank and ask for dollar and you get it. Even if you don't get it from the bank and you go to the BDC market, the spread is so minimal. It's so minimal.
Okay.
For the first time in many decades, I carry my naira card, ATM, and go to any part of the world and use it. You don't need to go with any dumb account card.
So you can travel with your naira card.
I'm not
so we're back to using our ATM card.
Yes,
because at
I'm
the point
telling
in time
you what I
stopped.
benefited from. Wow. Everyone, students abroad.
Okay. The CBN has a single-digit inflation target, but with the current happenings, especially the inflation right now, realistically, what's the timeline? Do you think the timeline is still achievable?
Yes.
With this current policy rate?
Yes. Now, this is the ambition of the Monetary Policy Committee, and that is why they are focused. You will recall that we have had this tight monetary policy stance for some time now, and people could sometimes ask, is this central bank not responsive to growth? Are they not pro-growth and the rest of them? Everything the central bank does is to support sustainable growth. And it requires proper calibration to ensure that you don't relapse in what you are doing. So a single digit is achievable, and our forecasts are showing that with all things being equal, we're going to achieve it. It may delay a little bit because of the interruption we have had, because of the international shocks that we receive, but I tell you that the bank is on course to achieve a single-digit inflation.
With the narrowing of interest rate globally, and the stance of the CBN, not to increase the rate of interest, in Nigeria, how does the CBN ensure that Nigeria remains attractive? From what the question she asked, attractive to foreign investors.
Yeah. Yes. At the moment, Nigeria is very, very attractive. Number one, what investors look at, I have told you before, they look at your reserves. In the event that they want to repatriate their investment, is there enough FX liquidity to be able to be paid? The answer is abundantly yes. Our reserves as of today stands over 50 billion US. We are in a very comfortable position. Let me give you an instance. When this shock started in early March, some foreign investors were worried, they were worried, and they wanted to leave. After a week or so, they decided not to leave. They said, look, we are comfortable here. They checked everything. That is why you have not recorded massive outflow. Even those that left had to come back to the market. So from that angle, Nigeria is in a good position. Number two, our real rate of return, that is the interest that you pay on investment minus inflation rate, is positive. Our real rate of return is positive. So that means that investors that bring in their funds here, you know, they have positive return on their investment. So they are comfortable. They have no reason to leave. And how do you know that? If investors are taking their investment away, it will easily show in exchange rate. You see massive depreciation happening to the exchange rate. So you haven't seen anything. And the bank is not selling dollars to the market. It now means that it is liquidity that is coming from foreign investors that is sustaining the foreign exchange market by itself. The bank is a mere participant in the market.
Okay, with all the successes now, Nigerians are a little bit bothered about the, you know, elevated borrowing, you know, from the federal government. So I'm thinking that how long can the economy, you know, sustain such elevated borrowing cost?
Yeah, so I'm not a spokesman of the Ministry of Finance.
Yes.
But I will tell you for free, because we also have robust interaction, what we call policy coordination with the fiscal. Now, if you look at the record, the government is doing a lot to slow down the rate of borrowing. And this is why they came up with all these reforms, particularly the tax reform. Our tax to GDP ratio has been one of the lowest in the world. And that is why there is always a recourse to borrowing. Now, that has happened. With the tax reform that has happened, a lot has improved in terms of internally generated revenue through tax and other, you know, returns to government. So that definitely in the near to medium term is going to reduce the quantum of borrowing that we might see. Because by the time you are able to meet your budget, you know, your budget proposal or your approved budget from internally generated revenue through taxes, you might not need to borrow to run the budget deficit anymore.
All right, let's look at the impact all these policies will have on Nigerians. How quickly should Nigerians expect to see the impact of this MPC decision on lending rates, saving rates, and even on consumer prices?
Okay, so what will happen, some could be instant. For instance, some banks or some investors could think that MPC was going to raise rate because of the slight increase in inflation that we recorded. We did not do that. So what does that mean? It means that the loans that Nigerians have received or collected from the banks are not going to be repriced. So they are going to pay the interest as they were paying before.
At the same rate.
At the same rate. You get the point? That is number one. If not, if the central bank had raised that rate even by half a basis point, you know what that means? The banks will immediately reprice those loans. That is a benefit to investors and all the borrowers from the bank. Number two, people that thought that the central bank was going to raise rate, they would have repriced other goods and commodities in expectation that the central bank was going to raise rate and prices all over the country and you know will rise. That was no longer going to happen. So because what the central bank is doing now is that their decision is basically on the ground of data. It's strictly according to the data they have analyzed. So they don't just sit down and take decision. So that will give some forward guidance to investors. That look, I have so bag of rice in my store, and I thought the central bank was going to raise rates so that prices will rise, and then by the time I exhaust that stock, I will go back to the market and buy at a higher price. That is no longer going to happen. So you have to now sell at the existing price. Otherwise, you are in a competitive market and you may not have anybody to sell to.
Indeed. So what measurable benefits, have, ordinary Nigerians generally seen, from this prolonged tight monetary stance that the CBN has?
What it means is that prices are stable, and it shows that the central bank is committed to bringing down inflation. That even though the pains we might have now seemingly is temporary, it is temporary. Definitely, as your colleague said, the Central Bank of Nigeria is moving towards a single-digit inflation. So that's an assurance. And investors also know that there is stability. And whatever we are doing is to ensure that within the shortest possible time, we're able to restore and consolidate on that stability such that the purchasing power of the ordinary Nigerians is restored.
So now that the Middle East crisis is still there, because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, though we heard that there might be, they might have a deal between today and tomorrow. If it persists, what's going to happen?
If it persists,
yes.
Nigeria is working together. The Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, and all other fiscal agencies are all working together. Remember that the crisis in itself has its two sides. Why we don't celebrate the crisis because of the casualty and all the impact it has, the other side of it is that as a net exporter of crude oil, it has its own benefit to Nigeria. There is this oil price windfall that we are enjoying, because at the moment the price of a barrel of oil is far ahead of the budget benchmark, that we have earmarked for crude oil. So it is expected that through strong policy coordination, that should be able to have a way of ameliorating its impact on the populace. And I'm sure the fiscal authority is doing something in that respect to ensure that the impact is minimal on Nigerians. Apart from that, because of that coordination, there are scenario analysis that if the price of PMS rise to a certain level, what should the bank do? What should government do? All these are issues that have been discussed between the central bank and government, so that each of these authorities should be able to do something that should not harshly affect the population.
As we begin to wind up on this conversation, what should the average Nigerian on the street take away from this MPC resolution?
Okay, thank you very much. The first thing is that the average Nigerian should not panic. There's no room for panic. The average Nigerian should know that this shock is temporary and it's not going to last for too long. There is one reason why the average Nigerian should know that. The issue at stake in the Middle East is about oil. It's a global commodity. It does not affect just the US, Israel, and Iran. It affects the entire world. In issues like that, there is probability that the impasse will not be prolonged for too long, even though it's already long. But you can see a lot of effort from the international community to ensure that there is a deal. That's number one. Number two, the ordinary Nigerian should know that our economic fundamentals are stable. We are in a better position. And that prices, because we are in a better position, every effort government is doing is to ensure that we have a steady decline in prices of goods and services, so that we are able to have an economy that is sustainable, so that we can reap the benefit of these reforms.
Okay, if you could send probably a message, to markets and households after, this conversation, what would that be?
First, let me speak to businesses or firms. The prices of goods and services are stable. They should believe in the fundamentals of Nigeria. the macro fundamentals. If foreign organizations like S&P can have confidence in what Nigeria is doing in the midst of this shock, then it is very clear that ordinary Nigerians should also believe in the reforms of the present government, that prices are not going to skyrocket as some people would think. So let them have belief in the reform that is going on. Let the ordinary Nigerians know that whatever decision, whatever reform government and the central bank is doing is in the interest of the masses, so their purchasing power can be restored and the future can be greater.
I like the
and
fact,
a win-win for all
I like
of
the
us.
fact when you say the masses, because right now, you know, let's say we have 250 million Nigerians, and I believe that maybe 200 million Nigerians don't even know what MPC is.
Yes.
So what are you doing to educate Nigerians on that?
Yeah, so this is part of
Yes.
the platform, and I thank NTA for always doing that. And when we come here, we try to break it down to a very simple level so that everybody would understand what we are talking about. So when MPC meets, MPC is meeting because they are worried if prices rises, because rise in price affect the poor more than the rich. So MPC is sitting at every of their meeting to ensure that the masses are protected and prices do not rise. That is why their mandate is to ensure low and stable inflation.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Victor Obo, for giving us that assurance that things are well with the economy. Dr. Victor Obo is the Director of Monetary Policy Department, Central Bank of Nigeria. Thank you so much for throwing more lights on the MPC resolution.
It's my pleasure.
All right.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you for coming.
Thank
so
you for
this is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NT. And to provide a background to our conversation, review of political parties, that's our second conversation. Here's a background report packaged by our correspondent, Timothy Yusuf.